Now, when parents start talking about parents' rights, they are appealing to this long history of a very well-meaning and generally emancipatory, positive, um, freedom-loving respect for rights, but they are blurring categories in ways that I think are pretty deliberate and nefarious, at least at the high levels of parental rights organizing. So unlike the kind of rights that just pertain to everybody, universal rights like I'm a human, so you can't arbitrarily kill me, for example, or rights that pertain to specific characteristics like you can't discriminate on the basis of sex, they are employing a different kind of identity, like a role identity, like I had children, and making that the basis for a rights claim. So because I had children, you owe me all these things and I'm entitled to all these freedoms because I'm a parent. That is sort of the structure of the claim. And it's not an accident because, as we've already seen, and this isn't news to you, a lot of so-called parents' rights groups are really taking aim at the rights of other specific individuals and groups of individuals. LGBTQ people are a favorite target. We saw how already the Parents' Rights in Education bill in Florida is really just a cover for trying to unroll decades of progress in LGBTQ inclusion and rights. So they see that this other group of people or other individuals have made gains in rights, in sometimes getting protection against discrimination, and in sometimes getting their experiences better represented.
I didn't realize I was muted. Stop. I didn't realize I was ranting good too. I was just gonna let that play through like it was live, but I have to stop and talk about this for a second because that was genuinely one of the most insane things I've ever heard. This bitch is quite literally saying that the only reason that parents are claiming that they have parental rights is because they want to undermine the rights of gay and trans children that are not theirs. And like gay people and trans people in general. There is no awareness at all that no, they believe they have parental rights because they birthed the child. The child is theirs. They are raising the child. The child is their responsibility. There's no awareness of it at all. She's literally just saying parents only the only basis of the parental rights movement is to undermine queer people. That's nuts. That's crazy. I did not see that argument coming at all. No acknowledgement that we're talking about their children. All right, let's keep going. I'm sorry. I had to. That was not. Am I wrong that that's not like? Have I miscalculated how insane that just was? That was insane. I don't think I miscalculated.
In education, and parents' rights provides a very convenient foil against the rights of LGBTQ people or other minority groups. So by appropriating rights and identity language, parents are saying, we're a minority too, or we're discriminated against too, and you can't just give all those other people all of their rights and not give us our rights. They're implicitly equating or contrasting different kinds of rights, which are actually not the same in terms of category. Why? LGBTQ people were, in fact, legally discriminated against in many ways as individuals, deprived of the same kinds of freedoms and opportunities that all other individuals were able to access. Progress was made in recognizing and protecting the rights of LGBTQ people, including in education, for example, by not talking about families in heteronormative and exclusionary ways in schools. And so they had redress through activism that was oriented around identity and rights language. Parents who oppose LGBTQ rights, parents who are fundamentally only interested in delivering a socially conservative curriculum relating to the family and gender, have therefore appropriated identity and rights language to say, but now you're trampling our rights. This is a false dichotomy. This doesn't mean that there's nothing to parents' concerns. As Lisa said, we can understand a number of ways that parents may have legitimate concerns about curriculum that changes quickly or is passed without consulting them or whatever, but that doesn't mean that they have the same kinds of rights to be protected from discrimination in the way that minority groups do, or that parents' rights are a function of kind of universal human rights. Next slide, please. So is there a conflict of rights going on here? Click. We can understand conflicts of rights as the interests of different stakeholders clashing and needing to be resolved in a pluralistic society. The structure of many political dilemmas, and especially education dilemmas, has this form. It seems like different people's interests are coming into conflict. So here's the group of stakeholders who call themselves parents are claiming rights, although as I just explained, rights language is a bit forced in this case, but they have interests. Whom are their interests coming into conflict with? You can just click a bunch of times, Lisa, because I had this animated. First of all, the government. So the government, as we said, is the origin of public schooling. And ironically, of course, most people in government are also parents. And a lot of parents work in government or work in education. So this is apples and oranges. These are not groups of people with distinct identities that never overlap. But parents may claim that their rights are being encroached on by the overreach of the government, and therefore they need to reassert their, scare quotes, rights as parents. But there are other stakeholders in this picture. Keep clicking. There are the educators, and let's not forget the children. So how are these all related?
I cannot fucking believe what I'm watching right now. Teachers do not have more rights over children than their parents do. This bitch is literally arguing that parents who are arguing that they are in charge of their children have less rights than the teachers teaching those children in government schools. Carlin, your predictions about how crazy this will be has aged like a 1,000-year-old fine wine. Yes, it has. This is the most insane thing I have ever heard in my life. Okay, people want me to rewind. All right, we'll do this section again. All right, I'm gonna mute myself so you guys don't hear me yelling, because like I cannot. This was not on my bingo card for this particular conference.
Next slide, please. So is there a conflict of rights going on here? Click. We can understand conflicts of rights as the interests of different stakeholders clashing and needing to be resolved in a pluralistic society. The structure of many political dilemmas, and especially education dilemmas, has this form. It seems like different people's interests are coming into conflict. So here's the group of stakeholders who call themselves parents are claiming rights, although as I just explained, rights language is a bit forced in this case, but they have interests. Whom are their interests coming into conflict with? You can just click a bunch of times, Lisa, because I had this animated. First of all, the government. So the government, as we said, is the origin of public schooling. And ironically, of course, most people in government are also parents. And a lot of parents work in government or work in education. So this is apples and oranges. These are not groups of people.
So she's arguing that because people who work in the government are parents too, that means that parents don't have rights over their kids because people who work in the government are parents too. This is the argument. But it's about to get crazier. Let's keep going. I'm just going to keep my mic here. Let's keep going.
With distinct identities that never overlap. But parents may claim that their rights are being encroached on by the overreach of the government.
Yes, correct.
And therefore they need to reassert their, scare quotes, rights as parents. But there are other stakeholders in this picture. Keep clicking. There are the educators, and let's not forget the children. So how are these all related? The educators, at least in public schools, do represent an arm of the government, and parents may therefore claim that they are in conflict with educators, which is partly why they storm school board meetings and sometimes argue with or even try to intimidate their children's teachers, because they say, I'm the child's parent, you're just a teacher. I have more of a right to raise my child than you do.
Correct.
But again, this is a false dichotomy. A, teachers and educators are mostly parents as well. B, although they may work for the government, that doesn't mean that they even agree with everything that the government says or even the curriculum they're required to teach.
Oh my
Educators
God.
actually teach under a lot of stress because they have to implement curricula and policies that are not generally their personal choices, but just what the state or the jurisdiction is telling them. And most fundamentally, the stakeholders that everybody is fighting over here are the children. Now, it makes sense that children wouldn't themselves be determining curriculum or education policy, but whoever is making the decisions, all curriculum and education policy should in principle be designed with children's interests in mind. So the government says they're protecting children, parents say they're protecting children, teachers say they're protecting children. How can all these things be true at the same time if everybody is disagreeing and claiming their rights are being trampled?
Because the government and teachers do not have the same rights over children as their parents do. This is nuts. This lady was like, teachers are parents too, and therefore they have more rights over the children in their class than the actual parents. Yo.
What is happening here is an unfortunate outcome of the way that liberal societies structure rights, which tends to pit individuals and groups against each other and overlook the ways that we actually have shared aims and need to cooperate in the interests of other groups. In this case, children actually depend on parents and teachers and many other adults working together. So arguing that one group or one individual has rights that trump the authority of the other group or the other individual tends to deprive children of their due regard.
So you can't argue that parents' rights supersede those of the government, because if you do, you are putting your children at risk, or excuse, not even their children, because they will not say that the kids are their children. You are putting the children, not their children, the children. Wow. She is literally arguing that parents and the government and government school teachers all have equal rights over the children, and that we really shouldn't pit them against each other because they all have the best interest of the children at heart. Are you kidding me? And that no one of these groups should supersede any of the other groups. No, wrong, incorrect.
Keep going.
Yes, keep going. Yes.
Although there's no universal declaration of the rights of the parent or convention on parents' rights, as Lisa mentioned, this is very much in flux, especially in the United States. They are attempting to get parents' rights enshrined more formally. Children's rights have, in fact, been recognized internationally for many years. And children's rights are defined in such a way, very insightfully, I think, that the authors of the Convention on the Rights of the Child are giving parents appropriate authority and leeway in the raising of their children. So the Convention on the Rights of the Child, which you see here, has
they're giving parents appropriate leeway in the raising of their children. So you're telling me that parents have had their, and this is not a legal thing. This is a socialist idealist thing, but let's play the game they're playing. This woman is arguing that parents who never agreed to this have their parental rights granted to them with appropriate leeway with which to raise their children by the Convention on the Rights of the Child. So you're telling me that an agreement that no parents agree to is the thing and has no legal basis in the United States at all, is the thing that is granting parents appropriate leeway to raise their children? Remember, guys, socialists believe that children are but little adults that can make all their own decisions. They're much like Scientologists in that regard. And we're seeing that play out right in front of us.
many, many articles, but I'm just pulling out Article 5, which is blown up on the side, which says that parties, meaning anyone with power, so that could be the government, that could be teachers, that could be educational policymakers, shall respect the responsibilities, rights, and duties of parents, et cetera, in the exercise by the child of the rights recognized in the present convention. What that means is when parents exercise their authority, you can call it rights, but it's also a responsibility and a duty, they should do so with the rights of the child in mind. The rights of the parents are not supposed to be distinct from and in competition with the rights of the child. They're supposed to be harmonious. The reason that we do give parents a lot of leeway in law and in custom in the raising of their children is because in the normal scheme of things, parents actually are best positioned to meet their children's interests.
Smartest thing you said all day.
Educational decisions for their children.
Exactly.
It's not because children are parents' property and parents can just do whatever they want with them. Or
did you hear that? It's not because children are just parents' property and they can do whatever they want with them. That is a socialist thing. Again, remember, guys, socialists believe that the nuclear family upholds capitalism and they have to abolish the nuclear family to get rid of capitalism. And one of the things they believe is that children are considered to be the private property of their parents under the capitalist system, and it's their job as socialists to liberate children from being the private property of their parents. And this woman just said it's not like children are property of their parents. That's a socialist. That is a socialist. Let's listen to that again. That was crazy. Quiet part out loud, bitch. Quiet part out loud.
Normal scheme of things, parents actually are best positioned to meet their children's interests and make educational decisions for their children. It's not because children are parents' property and parents can just do whatever they want with them, or that being a parent, like having successfully reproduced, gives you inalienable rights to control the life of another person.
Oh my
that
God.
has never been legally enshrined in a universal convention or in American law either. So, well, maybe Lisa can correct me on the history, but I wouldn't want to live in a place where that's enshrined in law. So when we talk about parents' rights, there is no separate list of things to which parents are entitled legally or by convention. And insofar as we do give parents a lot of authority, so yes, parents have more authority over their children than teachers do. I don't think anyone's really disputing that.
Finally.
It just comes down to specific cases. We give them that much authority because it's usually in the best interests of the child. The question is, when there's a conflict, what is in the best interests of the child? Next slide. No, not a slide? Right. Sexuality education, of course, is just a bellwether for all of these conflicts. This is an image taken from a protest over sexuality education in Toronto, where I live. And there's a lot that could be commented on here, but something that's really ironic is when parents are opposing sex education on the grounds of parents' rights or parental choice, they sometimes advertise their hypocrisy like on placards very loudly and clearly. How is it that a child could be standing there holding a sign saying, "My child, my choice," when the parents who gave them the placard are claiming that it is theirs, the parents' choice, what to do with the child? The child does not have any choice here, and the parents are arguing for their political position on the grounds that as parents...
This is the stupidest woman I've ever heard from in my life. The children are not arguing. The sign does not reference their children. The sign references them. Also, she's Canadian, so we can pretty much dismiss anything she says anyway. But that is the dumbest possible interpretation of that photo.
Parents, they have final, maybe even exclusive authority over their children. So whose choice is it really? Children are clearly being enlisted at an age when they're far too young to object, to secure their so-called parents' rights without even understanding what's at stake. This is just an illustration of the false dichotomy between parents' rights and children's rights.
She's literally saying that these children are being used to campaign for having their own rights taken away, and they're just too young to know better. The evil parents made the children hold signs and made them literally campaign to take their children's rights away, and the children they are too young to know better.
Therefore, to conclude my little section here, parents' rights, not legally enshrined, not universally recognized. There is no slate of things to which all parents are entitled just because they reproduced. But the rhetoric of parents' rights very successfully agitates people and picks up on other kinds of interests and values that we probably do want to recognize. We do want to recognize that parents are and should be very involved in their children's sexuality education, and that sometimes the government or teachers do things that we want to object to. And as parents, we have to have appropriate mechanisms for expressing that dissent and for advancing our own values. None of that translates into parental monopoly over sex ed. Because in addition to parents, you have teachers, you have children, the government, policymakers, as well as healthcare professionals like nurses, as well as community leaders, including clergy people, many of whom have legitimate, valuable roles to play in the sexuality education of children. As I said before, all of the adults' activities.
You know who I definitely don't want educating my kids about sex? The clergy, for reasons. This only has 2 minutes left, and let's just finish it up, and then I'll give my closing thoughts at the end of the 2 minutes. Fine.
Activities should, in principle, be oriented toward the well-being of children. Children's rights are kind of the linchpin here, not parents' rights, but children's rights. Even if it's the
Children's rights are the linchpin here, not parents' rights, children's rights. Because remember, guys, as socialists, they believe that children are but little adults that can make all their own decisions, and they believe that it's their job to liberate the children from the adult supremacy of their parents, because when parents have rights over their kids, that means kids are private property of their parents. Wow. Jason, great observation. There, she is literally saying that the children belong to the community. Let's just listen to that last bit again.
Education of children. As I said before, all of the adults' activities should, in principle, be oriented toward the well-being of children. Children's rights are kind of the linchpin here, not parents' rights, but children's rights. Even if it's the case that parents have the next most importance after children in this list here. But we know, again, from research and from historical experience, that children's needs are best served when all the adults fulfill their respective roles. That doesn't mean they have to agree about everything. It means that they all have to be trusted sources of information and support for children, and that trying to reduce the children's circle of support to one stakeholder or one particular message tends to put in danger children who don't have access to other views and other sources of information. I'm not sure if there's anything else on this slide. Click.
I am getting nothing. Here we go. Okay, so I think Lauren and I are pretty much done. We have hit our hour, and we feel like you are probably pretty well educated now. So thank you to everybody for joining us, even in this video kind of format. And have a wonderful day.
Thank you. I truly and sincerely have never been so flabbergasted in my life by a presentation. That was nuts. I was expecting something crazy, but I wasn't quite expecting it to be so on the nose. I wasn't quite expecting them to come out and say, your children belong to the collective. I wasn't quite expecting them to literally acknowledge that they consider children to be private property of their parents. And because these are people who believe we need to abolish private property, that means they need to liberate the children from being private property of their parents. I wasn't quite expecting them to say that parents really don't have any rights over their children except the rights we grant them via this convention that no one ever agreed to and has no legal standing in the United States at all. I wasn't expecting them to say that parents should defer to the clergy on the sex education of their children, but that's for a whole other reason. That just seems ill-considered. Wow! There was one presentation at the National Sex Ed Conference about parental rights. Well, I mean, maybe they did one in person, but like, there was one online. And the big culmination of the answer to the question, should parents have rights in sex ed, is that parents have the rights that we grant them, and their children and their children belong to the community.